Okay. Right. Hello, everybody. Our whole one viewer who might watch this. Um, no, whoever is watching this, thank you for taking your time to check in on what Lucy Draper-Clarke and myself are going to be discussing. I'm in the garden. Lucy is in her space in Johannesburg, and yeah, this is the first podcast or videocast. We're not quite sure what it is yet, of what I'm putting together and sharing conversations, discussions with people who I find inspiring, interesting, and who are coming up with very creative solutions to the problems that we face as humans on a giant rock flying through space. So the first participant, co-creator in this experiment is Lucy. So hello, Lucy. Good morning.
Good morning.
Welcome. Thank you.
I feel very honored to be the first in this experiment. So
yes.
Thank you for inviting me.
Yeah, Lucy is the first. You are the first because of that email that you sent a few weeks ago. But we'll jump into that in a bit. What I'm going to encourage us to do, me and you and anyone who's watching this, is to just take 1 minute of silence. You could call it a friend of, I don't know if you know Perry, but he had a thing called Just a Mindful Minute. But whether you're sitting, standing in your kitchen, in the bath, in the car, or no, if you're driving, maybe pull over first. That would probably be good. But yeah, let's just take a seat. We can close our eyes and just relax the body. We generally tend to hold too much tension. So just allow yourself to become aware of that. And as you become aware of it, so it dissolves. Take a deep breath, releasing and relaxing even more with the exhale. And for 1 minute, we'll just be silent and relatively still wherever we are, enjoying doing nothing. Yeah, deepening the breath. Just becoming aware of the body. If it feels good to take a little stretch, just be grateful to move and be alive, and allow that stretch to release you. Opening the eyes and settling in for the next hour or so. So maybe that's a nice starting point, Lucy. What happens when you're relatively still and relatively silent, even just for 1 minute.
Well, what I noticed was the birds in my garden seemed to be communicating with the birds in your garden. So what I love is that sense of being able to open our awareness to things which we don't normally notice. And that may be something within my own body, like the heartbeat, or a sense of relaxation, or it may be, opening the senses to the world outside.
Sure.
So that's
Sure.
what made me smile during the practice, was the birds.
Yeah, the birds. The birds are important. Yeah, it was a big decision whether I was going to do this inside or outside. And I said to Eve, "What do you think?" And she said, "No, do it outside." And I said, "Yeah, but what about the birds? It's distracting. Me and Lucy are trying to have a conversation." I said, "The birds might irritate people." And she said, "Well, if birds irritate people, they're not going to listen to this podcast."
She's very wise.
But yeah, I mean, I thought it'd be nice to just start with a minute of just being, still being quiet. And what I've really enjoyed about this whole Zoom experience over the past, this heightened Zoom experience over the past couple of months is, in teaching classes and things like this, that everyone is kind of in their own space. And we're gathered on the screen, and we're all listening and watching and participating, but we're all sitting and maybe, moving in our own spaces. People are in their homes or wherever they are in the world. And there is this like tapping into yourself and your surrounding wherever you are, which kind of has this very nice collective feel, that people are in so many different times and space, yet we're all in the same time and space. And there's something different about it compared to when you're all in the same room together.
Yeah, and there's a
noticed
sense that, well, we also can't kind of sanitize and fix our own environment. Like, life happens, children walk by, animals, knock on the door. So there's
Sure.
a lovely sense of doing our practice with our life, rather than trying to separate practice from our daily life, which I think,
nice.
yeah, I think that's sometimes useful when we're beginning a practice, to have a particular place which feels quiet and contained. But the whole idea for me of practice is that we become more skillful in living each day. So then we need to take our practice out into the world and
Sure.
roll with all the craziness that happens, which we've really experienced over these last 5 months or so.
Totally. And I think that's another interesting boundary or threshold that's being crossed or linked or forced, in that normally also people separate work from home. Not everyone, but a lot of people do. And now people have had to work from home, and again, it's kind of like, who are you at the office and who are you at home, and these different roles that we play in the different spaces that we occupy. But that's all being challenged, I guess.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Mm.
And that sense of identity, which we can hold on to our identity quite strongly in different contexts, as you say, roles and identities. But when we're all just in our own home, then there's a call, I think, an invitation to be more authentic, just to be who you really are.
Yeah. And that it's okay. It's okay to, if the dog walks past or whatever, I don't know why we're obsessed with perfection. Or that it now I'm Dave at the yoga studio, and I talk like this when I'm Dave at the yoga studio, or now I'm Dave the podcast guy. Or it's there shouldn't be a difference, really. And I found myself doing that this morning. Like I said, I set up inside and I had the lamp, and like I was like, okay, yes, this looks good and it's contained. And then I was like, what would I want to do if I actually was having a discussion with Lucy? You know, like maybe we'd meet at the wilds and that, you know, put a picnic blanket down and then we could record it and just do what we normally do instead of trying to be I don't know, presentable. It's like in a compensatory way. Like I think technology is also somehow amplified that. You know, everything's curated. You know, this is my website and this is my profile and these are my posts and this is the and I don't know. It's strange. It is what it is. You know, but I think a little bit of down to earthness is appreciated. I don't know where you stand on all that, and you're someone who comes from a slightly different generation than me, so you know, we grew up a bit more with you know, phones and things and social media when I was a teenager, but I don't know what's your feelings on that?
Yeah, I mean, I guess, although I am from a different generation, I've also have that type of mind that always wants to know what the new thing is. So I do feel comfortable with technology, but the sense of trying to identify one aspect of ourselves that we present, I think, is very interesting. Whereas actually we are the whole of our experience and what we bring. So we can't just sort of separate off these different parts. And so when you were speaking, that's what came to me, you know, especially because I do some work at the university where we're asked to specialize and go really deep. And you have to kind of put yourself into one particular field. But there's definitely a call now within the university to be more interdisciplinary, to be multidisciplinary, and to take, you know, the whole of ourselves. So although my background is from education, the last couple of years I've worked more with the School of the Arts at Drama for Life. And that is a department which brings the whole of the body, the heart, and the mind into the academy. And I found that incredibly refreshing. And I was thinking back, you know, one of the educators I've admired so much was Ken Robinson, who sadly died a couple of weeks ago.
Oh.
And his classic phrase was that academics use their body to carry their heads to meetings. And I just thought, I don't want to be like that. I want to use the wisdom of the body. I want to allow the heart to guide us in terms of what fascinates us, where we want to do more research, what we want to learn more, you know, where we are seeking knowledge and wisdom. Let the whole of ourselves be part of that, rather than just separating off into a particular specialization.
Totally. Yeah, the mind likes to separate things. It likes to organize the chaos. It likes to, you know, it's what it does, and it's very good at doing it. But there's another intelligence in the body that is very tangible. I find, you know, it's I can feel, you know, through the senses. There's an awareness that kind of is expansive and is inclusive in a way, and yeah, it's very interesting how we do separate the body's experience from the mind's experience. Like obviously there is no separation, literally. I mean, we know that it's one thing, but you know, how we say, oh, the mind and the body, and it does it. Yeah, I mean, I remember being very heady, and that what you said, you know, what did you say, educators or lecturers
Yeah, or
use their
academics, the body.
academics, yeah, use their body to carry their heads, and that's all. You know, just eat and sleep and just head, you know, all day, like just a lot of information. And I just remember, and I still do it. I have to watch myself, but I can get very carried away with ideas and thinking, and you just, I don't know. It's an interesting one, and I guess also this kind of technology, you know, cell phones, computers. There is a sense that you're connecting to like a vast intellectual world and you know, creative world of video and film and information and people, and it's very active and it's very busy, but the body is completely sedentary, you know, while you're doing it. Of course, the inner workings of the body are still doing what they need to do in order to survive, but yeah, why do you think that is? Why do you think we've become very, I don't know, I guess, like mentally focused? Like, why is that such a big deal? And then the body is just left to fend for itself.
There's a couple of things coming up for me as you speak and as you ask that question. Because I think, you know, when we're trying to hold everything in what we consider the brain, it's almost like just computer processing. But of course, when we take in the whole body, we also get in touch with the world of feelings. And that really isn't comfortable for so many of us. You know, the emotions lead us into places that we're not ready for, or they ask us to look very honestly at things that we may not want to look at. Whereas we can kind of rationalize, if we just have that sense, the Cartesian split between mind and body. So by bringing everything back together, we are asking ourselves to feel. And when we feel, of course, then we don't just feel our own feelings, we feel that of others. And that is incredibly painful in the world that we're living in, and particularly, you know, in South Africa, there's so much struggle and difficulty, and we need to be open to all of that and kind of step in where we can, but also just take care of this body and heart and mind as well.
Totally, for sure. I mean, we agree on most things. This is why it's more of a just an open conversation. Let's just watch the mic there. I think it's just catching on your. There we go. Just needs a bit of space. That's it. You know, we need to be at least a little bit professional. Can't have mics rubbing up against hoodies. And anyway, so yeah, so a little bit then, like, about your background, which I'm fascinated by, because anyone who's watching or listening to this, me and Lucy have only met twice, I think. But I've always just been fascinated, and I've heard a lot about what you do, and a lot of the people who've done things with me have done things with you, and then I kept doing my research, and I was like, wow, and Lucy's like, you know, done some pretty amazing things in her lifetime, and I guess here's someone who's done a lot, you know, studied at some of the best universities in the world, got some of the highest, you know, accolades you can get as an academic, and also has a you know, vast kind of alternative interests as well, but here you are, you know, still talking about learning, and still talking about, you know, willing to grow and ask more questions. And something that I really enjoyed that you wrote, and a lot of the people that I'm going to be having these conversations with, adopt this attitude of researcher-practitioner, which for me kind of equals embodiment. If you're researching and you're practicing, then you're saying that you're trying these things on. You know, you are research. I've always loved one of my teachers, Tom Wexler, who will be on this podcast soon as well. He just very simply said, well, research means to look again. You know, research, to search again. So you might already know what you know, or but you're willing to look again. And practice is like, well, you know, you're willing to actually dedicate very focused time and energy and effort to embodying this idea or this concept or what you found through this research. So yeah, I mean, when you say researcher practitioner, what do you mean? I mean, how does it, what are you trying to, what's like the message behind that?
So I guess the research is in multiple dimensions. So academic research, I do find fascinating. You know, I love to read journal articles and books that have been well thought through and presented. But then there's also the research or the studying of spiritual texts. And mainly I've focused on Buddhism, but I'm, you know, also getting very interested in multiple traditions and recognizing that they all are presenting the same underlying truth. So there's those two directions, the kind of, the academy, which you could say is modern or Western, but then the ancient as well. And then the practitioner side of things is just seeing how this, whatever I study, how does it play out in my own life? What helps me live a more harmonious life? And that's where I've kind of moved through these steps. Like the yoga was such a huge love for me because it returned my awareness back to my body, and I could feel vitality and aliveness and connection with breath. And then moving into a meditation practice, you know, just recognizing how much suffering we can free ourselves from by being in the present moment. Because of course, if our minds are in the past, there's like a yearning or a longing, which can lead us into depression. Or on the other hand, there's a sense of regret, you know, something that I did in the past. And we find our minds get pulled back there a lot for certain personalities. And then other personalities, more my sort of personality, is always looking into the future. And along with that comes quite a lot of anxiety. I used to wake up in the morning with like a pounding heart, thinking of what's coming today, you know, that sense of foreboding. And then I realized, like, you can release yourself from so much of that just by being in the present moment, and also getting in touch, as we mentioned at the start, with the more subtle aspects of the present moment. And what I've found with that is my relationships are able to really like deepen, and I learn so much from the people I'm with because I'm present. I'm wanting to hear not just what they say, but also sense into what they're feeling or what their needs might be. So that was like the mindfulness immediately gave me a big sort of, or a deeper framework with which to live life. But where I noticed the biggest changes was actually when I started exploring the compassion work. And that does work with actually a different part of the brain, which is so interesting. You know, when we cultivate compassion, we are kind of energizing or drawing energy into the part of the brain that is also linked with well-being. So it's such a fascinating paradox that when we're willing to look at difficulties and then act in a way that can alleviate them, we actually give ourselves energy and vitality and a feeling of well-being. So I just found this such useful work for the communities that I'm engaged with, like teachers who can get absolutely exhausted all the time, you know, caring for their pupils, whatever
Right.
type of teaching we do. But also like people in NGOs or activists, you know, who are right at the front of human suffering. So the compassion has helped me enormously, partly just to quieten my own inner critic, but also then to offer that out to others.
Right.
As
Very
skillfully
nice.
as I can, but
Yeah.
it's a work in progress.
Yeah. There's a lot of juicy stuff that you mentioned there, and I think I would try work through it as best as I can. I mean, the challenge that, you know, we're pretty certain it's a kind of universal for humans, that this kind of regret and resentment of the past, and then the anxiety of the future. And I've always kind of seen it and understood it as like a very vicious circle and cycle. You know, I have fears of what I experienced in the past, and I don't want to experience that again. Therefore, I will avoid those things so that I don't experience them again in the future. And there is that sense then of being stuck in that worldview, in that narrative, in that in that cycle. And then, of course, coming into the present moment, like you said, it brings up those feelings, because now you're pausing in the cycle and you're actually seeing this, and it can be very overwhelming, and most people want to avoid that even more, which is crazy, because it's like, as you take a step towards maybe solving the problem and finding some kind of solution, then there's like an overwhelming sense of like, oh, the problem. But in coming into being present, that's the only space that you can actually take care of anything, that you can actually, if you want to change anything, that's the only space that you can actually do it. If you stay running around in this cycle, you're not never really going to make any changes. That pause, which allows you to see and hear your own voices in your head, your own ideas, your own feelings. That's a big scary one for a lot of people, and it's I guess, how would you encourage someone to, you know, be able to just be with that?
So that many different ways. I do think the movement practices are the most containing, particularly, and when we work with communities who've experienced a lot of trauma, the body-based practices feel the most supportive, because you can return to something that's very tangible, and therefore you are in the present moment. And also that sense of moving, the tightness, the trauma, the contraction of the muscles, like out of the body through movement.
Right.
So I find, whether it's yoga, whether it's qigong, recently I've been exploring dance as a modality for really supporting our consciousness, and moving those kind of stuck energies through us.
Sure.
So movement, and even, I mean, exercise too, whether it's running, whether it's swimming, all of those things really support us.
Yeah.
So that's, for me, the preliminary place. But then really titrating our practice. So moving in, like as we did, a 1-minute practice or a 3-minute practice, and then slowly building up and building up with a sense of lightness and often a big dose of humor, you know, that noticing where we're doing the same thing again. Because what I've observed is that, I suppose, depending on our personality, some people will go really for like hardcore approach, and they'll do like a 10-day Vipassana, like silent retreat. And for some, it's amazing, like they have great breakthroughs. But for others, it can put them off meditation for the rest of their life because it's too overwhelming.
Sure.
So I think we need some, you know, basic knowledge of ourselves, what we can manage, but also then to work with someone. I think that's where a spiritual friend or a guide or a meditation teacher can be really, really supportive in inviting us forward, but at the pace that is going to be of most benefit. Yeah.
Sure. Yeah, the movement, I mean, obviously, you know, we're in agreement there. And it's amazing. I had a phone call with a very, very close friend, and he lives in Miami, and amazing human. And he's a big guy, big, like, muscular guy, you know, the calisthenics guy, like on the bars, you know, like defies gravity. But he's just such a character, such a heart-warming person. And but he's like this big beard, and like and we were just talking about being alive, you know, just aliveness, and just unsticking that tension, you know, just allowing yourself to breathe, you know, just like, you know, I'm alive, like I'm actually here. It's something we just take for granted, and I feel like I know why it is, because it is of that cycle, you know, and we're just holding on to the past and hoping for the future, and it's a very scary place to be. And this maybe brings us to that the email newsletter that you sent out a few weeks ago, talking about the concept of the triune brain, and, you know, thankfully neuroscience currently at the moment is really like trending, which is probably the first trend I'm actually really happy about. People are actually going, you know, well, in neuroscience, and I'm like, yes, good, this is a good thing to be saying. And neuropsychology and all these wonderful things where we're finding these bridges between, like you mentioned earlier, ancient traditions and kind of modern science, of this triune brain. And for people who don't know what we're talking about, we'll share the article and the link. And basically, it is a simplification for sure, but it's definitely an access point to those concepts that we're talking about. Of the past is very much associated with the brainstem, and the kind of very ancient part of the body and the brain, and the nervous system, the kind of reptilian core, which is based on survival. And I remember I can't remember where you actually got that diagram from, but it says, am I safe? What else does it say on that? Do you remember?
So the three, like the brain stem, the back brain, its underlying question is, am I safe? And
Right.
then the mammalian brain, or, you know, the emotional brain, is, am I loved? Am I
Right, the
cared
limbic
for?
system.
Yeah. And then our frontal brain, which is what really makes us unique as human beings, because we can plan for the future. We can, you know, look into we can create, we can do all of those, the work with the imagination. But that asks, like, what can I learn? So
Right.
it's the part of the brain that's always seeking something new
And can
wondering about the
reflect
future.
as well.
Yeah.
And I guess, what I was getting to is that the coming to understand like a basic like the basic functions of the brain and the body is super helpful, and a lot of people don't have access to that. I mean, this isn't stuff that you get taught in school, which is unfortunate. But I mean, you're doing that kind of stuff, and we'll get to that question in a bit. But there's these three kind of core questions of what am I, who am I, and why am I? And I feel like they're addressing three main issues which sit in those three parts of the brain. Am I safe? So that kind of reptilian brainstem core is like there's a sense of like a needing for peace of mind there around I'm alive, I can breathe, I have food, I have a family, like, and I'm well, actually not even I have a family, but like I am alive. And then that next part of the brain, the limbic system, I feel like deals with social cohesion and a sense of belonging and a sense of understanding me, because that's obviously where the ego resides, in the kind of thalamus and the whole limbic system. The I and the me and the we, and do I belong and do I not belong, and then that the prefrontal lobes, which is obviously what makes us human. In terms of that limbic system is mammalian. Mammals have that, right? And the prefrontal cortex, like you said, asks what can I learn, and kind of speaks to a sense of understanding, like like what is this all about? What can I learn? What can I how can I grow?
And what's my purpose? Kind of, why am I here?
Yeah. And I mean, what is interesting, you're involved in education now and for a long time, but particularly now when there is such a vast access to information like this, teachers, educators, people doing amazing work, yet in people not having the funds to be able to access this information or this kind of thing. And I know you've done a lot of work in societies and communities that are extremely disadvantaged, and I don't know, I just find this kind of dichotomy, this contrast, so intense to deal with sometimes. And like, how can we help people? And then it's like, well, I can't help the whole world, but the stuff is so valuable and so important, and it's made such a difference in my life. So I just was wondering, like, how you've found very interesting ways to share this work, to those communities. And I don't know, I just wondered, like, how is it received, and where is the bridge?
Well, I mean, I think we all have that yearning to be happy, whatever your background is, whatever circumstances you find yourself. And so when we start moving in our body, when we start getting a sense of how to treat our own thoughts compassionately, then that ability to be happy just, everyone knows how to do it. They just, like, it's an innate quality, and then we can learn to cultivate. So I'm just trying to think what's most, or shall I pause for the plane to go over?
That there's people in that plane wondering the same thing. How can I be well, I mean, happiness is an interesting word, but like, I think contentment is maybe the word that I'm drawn to more. But like you said, every human wants that, at least every sane, healthy human.
I think
but even
every human, but
every
just
human,
maybe we try and find it in different
ways, yeah. And some of those ways are a bit questionable.
Yeah, I mean, that's where really understanding, trauma and what it does to our bodies and brains is really useful. And the whole field of epigenetics is another one that I've found fascinating. I haven't explored it deeply, but how, our traumas are passed down in our DNA. Right. So particular communities are very prone to getting certain types of cancer, for example, because the trauma has been passed down in the DNA, and that's how it manifests. So
talk about attachment to the past.
Yeah, and completely unconsciously. It's not like anyone wants that sort of attachment. I mean, often we talk of attachment because we're grasping onto something we like. But there's all that unconscious kind of holding on as well.
Yeah. What we've adopted without even knowing that it's just ingrained. It's just,
in our DNA, in our conditioning. And I suppose I'm sort of circling back to compassion because I love it so much. But it really invites us to bring that compassionate awareness to ourselves in terms of our conditioning. So particularly people in fields of like looking at critical theory, so around race, around gender, this understanding that we've been conditioned so deeply that for us to unlearn these things is incredibly painful. And that's why racism is so deeply entrenched. That's why, the issues of gender are so hard to move, because we're completely unaware that we're holding on to those positions. Yeah. And it's only when we come face to face with something that makes us reevaluate our opinion that we can change, but that in itself is really painful.
Yeah, and I mean, it's like even constructed literally, into our environments. It's so like it's so overt, it's covert, to use old Sherlock Holmes's. I just wanted to pick up on something there, because that's what I was going to with the triune brain. When I don't feel safe, right, well, that's been severely challenged, and I don't feel loved, and I don't feel like I belong. Like my sense of understanding is very different, right? I have a very so you've spoken about protest, and you've done some work with like protesters and activists and this kind of thing, and there's a lot of unrest in the world. There always has been, there always will be. It seems, for a lot of people, like it's more intense now, and it could be. I feel like that is just because we have access to so much. We're seeing it now. We're seeing the pain and the suffering and what's going on. But and people are very angry, and people feel like they have a very strong right to be angry. But if we keep perpetuating those cycles, will there ever be solution, you know? And so I was wondering, the work that you've done, like with protesters and activists and these kinds of things, yeah, how do you channel that energy, which like we said, in its nature is wanting, that's like, I have to take action because things are not good for me and the community that I'm in, or the people that I represent. You know, we are not equal. There's the equality is not there. And we're taking a stand because we want things to be better. You know, we want to be happy, we want to be free, we want to be heard, we want to be recognized. But of course, a lot of that can fuel a lot of hatred, and a lot of more separation and more discord. So what is some of the things that you've done and or seen done over the years and been a part of that helps to channel that energy, that anger, into, you know, something constructive and something collaborative and something that is, you know, maybe there's a sense of forgiveness and compassion and understanding?
Yeah, I mean, certainly I see emotions as information. So anger it gives us information that harm is being caused. And that may be harm to us. So it may be a personal anger, or maybe harm that we're seeing being done to our community. So that's a more sort of collective expression. And anger, it also contains within it like a virtue of integrity. It says this is where the boundary ends. So it's like a clear no. So I don't have like a problem with anger per se. What happens though is anger can turn inwards, and we burn up. So we often talk about the burnt out activist who's fueled by anger, because it's a heat, it's like the fire element, and it burns and it's empowering.
Right.
So I would say anger
It's validating
can be,
as well. It's like validating my story. It's yeah.
So it can shift into that. It can become like the self-righteous anger, which then is what sort of circles inwards, I would say. And that's, I feel, where we can burn up, and where our actions can now become unskillful, because it's much more about the self being right than about the cause or the situation at hand. Because there's definitely a need for justice. You know,
Right.
there are harms that have been caused which need to be put right.
Right.
Where I then kind of shift into compassion is that it still has that same understanding that harm is being caused, but it comes from a place of kind of expansive, never-ending energy. So if you think of anger as fire, like it's going to burn out its fuel and then it's not there for us anymore. Whereas compassion, when we offer compassion, people feel it, and there's a sense of, it's kind of like a continuing cycle. Because if people feel supported, then there's a sense of gratitude, and that feeds back to us. It allows a feeling of well-being. So it's kind of, this circle. I mean, within the Buddhist teachings, compassion is called an immeasurable quality, because it can just grow and grow and grow.
Right.
And so it's the source of its own sustainment, if you like. So that is where my kind of focus has been, in terms of what I now use the terminology like contemplative engagement, because I do find a lot of people are frightened of the word activism. You know, particularly in the South African context, it has had that feeling of anger and violence and an unskillfulness. Whereas compassion comes from a place of wanting to build, wanting to heal. So understanding the perpetrators of the violence, understanding what their situation might be as well, and being able to take measures to support that. So if we look at gender-based violence, for example, having an understanding of the environment in which men have been conditioned, and their own sense of disempowerment, which now means that they oppress women in their lives.
Right.
So making sure that any type of engagement is not one, it doesn't have a single focus. It's like, what is the cause? What is the solution? Let's work on projects that address both of these.
Totally.
I heard a lovely metaphor, someone, I think also on a podcast, saying, after a while of pulling people out of the river, we realize that someone upstream must be throwing them in. So like attending to who is throwing people into the river and also being there to take them out. So allowing that kind of, much broader way of addressing these issues.
Yeah, and I think it's a very, like, it feels less symptomatic, like less. I feel like a lot of what we've done as humans has been like patchwork and treating the symptoms, just treating the symptoms so we can carry on with that cycle that we spoke about. And when you said what you said, I mean, obviously for me it brought up our current issue with pollution, and obviously plastic being what it is. And we can organize all these cleanups and keep picking up whether it's the beaches or the rivers, but where's it coming from? And it's not even about the people who are putting the plastic in. It's where's that plastic coming from? Why is there such an abundance of it? Can we not find another way, another solution? So I find something like compassion is going to the heart of the matter. It's going to the core, the root issue. And that requires digging, and that requires getting through layers. And that's the grind, the messy, the sometimes uncomfortable introspection and reflection that has to happen, and that's why we need it. Like, it's funny because compassion feeds itself, and I link compassion to courage, and like having courage to see beyond my limited perception and see beyond my limited sense of self to something broader. And like, I feel like once you've tasted that, it's so obvious. It's like, well, of course everything's connected, of course we're all connected. It's just literal, it's tangible. It's not some kind of mystical, supernatural, metaphysical, like hocus pocus. It's just what it is.
It's practical.
It's practical, So the word that I like that you used in some of what you've written and put out there, and you mentioned another version of it now, but I read critical contemplation, and then you said the other, what was it now?
So contemplative engagement, is that
contemplative engagement? Yeah, contemplative engagement.
So I guess there's the two, it's almost a continuum, but they feed back and forth, because there's the critical reflection is about unlearning our own conditioning.
Right.
And then the contemplative engagement is about actually acting on the things that move us. So finding our own unique purpose, for example, which may change as our life changes. I mean, that's what I've experienced is, my interests lead me down different pathways, and kind of one river leads into another river. But finding something that moves you emotionally and focusing on that, and kind of this circles a little bit back to who do we work with. And I think just keep it simple. We work with the people who are in our environment. We work with the people we have connections with every day. And, you know,
Right.
every now and again, we may be invited into different communities, which is can be a big honor and an opportunity to, to take whatever work we're doing, whatever interests us, and share it with other people. And it's also where technology has been, as you've said, extraordinary, that we can touch a global community, but also focus very much on just who's around us. Like, can we bring our compassionate practice to our own families, to our own...
Yeah. Well, that's the biggest one, no? Family. I mean, I my one teacher, he used to say, what did he say exactly? I'm going to get it wrong, but he'd be like, every day I wake up and I say to myself, I am at peace. I am love. I am, I'm ever present. And then my mom calls, I mean, just sitting around a family table, it's just all your triggers come up, all your ideas are challenged. And I think it's good. I think you need to, I think it's a big issue with that I personally have with kind of the very new age spiritual culture of hiding, and the term that's been used a lot is spiritual bypassing. But people just surrounding themselves with like-minded people and hiding. And I only listen to this stuff and I only read this stuff. And it's like, no, well, you're not, there's a universe outside of your little bubble, and we repeat those patterns. I mean, I did it, I've done it, and that's the only reason I can see it. And it's we run away from our families, and run away from challenges. And because we like, no, this is the truth, because and the message is beautiful. The message is love and peace and contentment, and it's like, no, well, yeah, but the universe is equally chaotic. and I feel like that's what you're talking about, that ability to then come back into engaging and learning and actually doing the practice in your day-to-day life, not just hiding on your meditation cushion or your yoga studio or your whatever it is, and being in the world.
I guess, like, one of the things I've really noticed of late with this idea of contemplative engagement is, there's a sense that we're helping others, but actually by going out and participating and getting triggered, then we're getting messages back as to where do we still need to do our contemplative practice.
Totally.
So the catchphrase that I used to have on my website was transforming the world from the inside out.
Right.
But recently I've thought, actually what we're doing is also transforming ourselves from the outside in.
Totally.
The messages from the outside world are saying, okay, you still need a bit more compassion here. You still need a bit more loving kindness here. You still need to find equanimity in the face of all this confusion.
Yeah.
And
for sure.
Yeah, and the language we use is so important. When you gave that example of I am peace, I am gentleness, sometimes affirmations, they just compete with how we're feeling. It sort of sets up a dissonance in the brain.
Yeah.
Whereas some of the more ancient language, which is, may I be at peace, may I be happy, may I be of benefit to others. It's aspirational. It's not claiming that we already are. It's saying, may I cultivate these and move in that direction.
Yeah. And it's just more humble. It just sounds more humble, and humility is such an interesting one because, like you said, it's, this I am already peace, and there's a lot of this going on, like, and I say it a lot, like, and it is, because compassion is innate, and these things are part of our evolution as a species. But so is jealousy, and so is separation, and so is violence. It's just part of the nature of the universe. It's just how it is, so how do you want to be? Do you want to be peaceful? Okay, well, you're going to have to do some work about it, and I like that humility, that sense of like, okay, I actually have to work for this. I don't just become enlightened or awakened or anything like this. We're running out of time, and I thought this would be beautiful to end on what we've been speaking about now, but maybe to make it even a little bit more tangible, is your work as a doula, which has a lot of meaning and purpose for you, and you found yourself bringing life into the world, and then also assisting with people pass on as well, or dealing with death. Maybe just a bit about that. I mean, there's nothing more engaging there's nothing more engaging than life and death. Nothing more reflective and humbling than witnessing birth and witnessing death. So what is this doula story, or what does the word even mean?
Well, it was a very unanticipated sort of direction of my work, and it was friends asking would I be present at certain kind of moments in their life. So I've realized it's holding the space for those rites of passage. So I'm not currently practicing as a doula, but I did attend 3 births when I was doing the training, and it was the most extraordinary experience. And as someone who hasn't had children of my own, it really put me in touch with that sacredness of bringing life into the world, that incredible gift of life. So more recently, the rites of passage that I hold are weddings, which are really fun. It's like such a lovely place of joy and love and connection. And then I anticipate, that there'll be more of a call as I also get older to facilitate those moments of passing. I haven't personally witnessed someone passing as yet.
Right.
I have held ceremonies, memorials, which has been a real honor to be asked to do that. So yeah, it wasn't something I ever anticipated, but when I look back, I realized that with our, what we both teach, the mindfulness practices, it's about holding space. And initially it's holding space for ourselves so that we can, just realize what's going on in this complicated mind of ours, and how the triune brain is giving 3 different messages. One is saying, am I safe? Another saying, I want connection. And sometimes the person we're seeking connection from is the one we're not actually safe with. So it sets up these confusions within us. So holding space as a mindfulness facilitator or mentor, and then holding space through rites of passage has been really a joyful experience for me. So thank you for bringing that up. And we could probably talk all morning, but
we could keep going. We could just keep going. But Lucy, thank you. It's been wonderful. I think there's if anything, hopefully there's more questions now than answers, and more willingness to talk, and that's the point. And not just to talk, but to take action, to do the practices, to reflect, to share, to connect. And I'm very grateful that you could be here, and that you do what you do. And we'll, when we share this, we'll give your bio and the links to your websites and everything that you do. And
well, thank you, Dave.
Just thank you.
I feel very honored to have been invited, and what a lovely morning just to have time with a friend to explore these issues of of how to live.
Yeah,
Compassion
totally.
and wisdom. Yeah.
That's it. Lovely. Well, Luz, thank you so much. And we'll see you soon. Maybe we'll do it again. It'd be cool to see where this momentum builds, and then we'll have another one and
or
see
sit on
what comes up then.
Sit in the wilds on a picnic blanket together.
Right. Yeah, actually do it. That would be cool.
Yeah. All right. Awesome.
Okay, Lucy.
Thanks so much,
so much.
Dave.
Okay.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye.